Hello and welcome to this next iMeshh video. So this is a cool one. Eevee, which is Blender's real-time engine, has had a huge update in Blender 4.2, making it far easier to get far more realistic results in real time. Now, I never used Eevee in the past because I always thought the results were pretty rubbish, but that has now changed inside of Eevee Next. I'm now amazed at the results that we can actually get. It uses ray tracing, it's far easier to get better results. So I've put together a how-to guide on how to make this modern living room scene. Now this will be a half time-lapse and a half tutorial kind of video. So I do expect you have some sort of basic knowledge inside of Blender. If you're new to Blender, then I do recommend you check out this tutorial series that I put together for absolute beginners to get you up to speed. Now, after you've done that, I do expect that if you have a few weeks of knowledge of Blender, then you shouldn't have any trouble with following this tutorial. Now this is quite fast paced, but it does generally have a lot of tips and tricks throughout the whole video. So I do recommend just watching the whole thing and soaking in as much knowledge as you can. But if you do have any questions, please do write them in the comments and I'll try to respond to everyone. Now I'm excited to teach you everything that I've learned with Eevee Next so far. So let's jump straight in. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is open Blender 4.2 and then I'm going to add a plane and then I'm going to press N to bring up this panel here. And then I can set the dimensions to be whatever I want. So I'm going to set it to 13 and then 7.5 meters. And then going to apply the scale. Before going to edit mode, I can press E to extrude, but I want to see how high, so I'm going to enable edge length display to enable this, to set this to 6.5 meters tall. Okay, so now I'm going to add a camera. And from here, I can change the rotation to be 0, and then rotate it on the X axis by 90 degrees, and then rotate it on the Z axis by 90 degrees to make sure it's completely straight. Then under the format settings, I'm going to change the resolution to be this. And then I can push the clipping in so that I can actually push through the wall and actually see through. I'm going to turn on the passepartout so I can actually see what's going on, and then change the focal length to be 55 millimeters. And then I'm going to use some shift. I might change this a little bit later, but I'm going to just roughly put it about here. And then I can add a loop cut, which I'll use to cut out a new wall. Then I'm going to go to Edit, Preferences. In case you want to know, if you go down to Face Orientation, I always have a red wall, and that's showing me the face orientation. And I've turned the alpha right down. I've also turned the blue one completely off. That's so I can have the face orientation on all the time. If you go to this button here, you can turn that on and off. But I have it on all the time so I can always see if my normals are facing, and it's not going to blind me. So this is wrong, so I'm going to flip it. I'm going to rotate everything on 90 degrees just so everything is on straight when I press 1 on the numpad. And then I'm going to bring this wall out about one more meter. I'm just trying to roughly get the camera into the position where I want it to be. I think that these walls should probably come over slightly, so I'm going to put it about here. And then I can delete this face ready for a window. I'm going to enable composition, guys, because it makes it easier to follow some sort of composition. I'm going to extrude this wall out so I can make it a sort of feature wall here, and then add some bevel. Of course, you should have bevel to all of your objects. I'm going to do shade auto smooth, and then make sure under shading, make sure you enable harden normals. I'm then going to add a cube. I'm going to scale that right down. And then this is going to be a step. Just pull this out on the X axis. And then bring this up on the Z axis a little bit. I'm going to pull it out a little bit further. I want this to be kind of a feature element where it goes out into the outside as well. But it does want to be a step, so I'm going to add a loop cut here. And then bring that up slightly before clicking on the bottom face, and then press E to extrude that out. And I am pressing 1, 2, 3 on the keyboard to do vertex, edge, and face select. Let's bring this out slightly, and then let's add another cube here. I'm going to scale this right down. Let's turn off this edge length measurement. Now let's select this top face and press GZ to bring that up on the Z axis. I'm going to press A to select everything, and then SX to scale on the X axis before doing Shift D, X, and then doing Shift R to duplicate that action. And let's make another cube here for this top wall feature. I'm not entirely sure what this is, but it looks kind of nice in the render. I'm going to add 2 loop cuts on the bottom part here. And then I want to extrude that out, but let's just delete these edge faces, do Shift G and select by normal. And then I can select this middle face and do EZ to extrude that through. And then I'm going to select both of them and do copy modifiers. You can do Control L with that. And then to bring that down, put roughly into position. We're not going to see that part anyway, but I think we might see some shadows from that, so let's bring that up. Now let's add another cube. This is going to be the window. I'm going to try to make this window quite simple, but I think it will be quite effective in the end. So what I'm going to do is just bring this into position roughly into the correct height. I will adjust this later, but let's just select both of these faces. Press I to inset, and then press E and then SX to scale them on the X axis. And then press I again. Then press E and then SX again to extrude these through. Then I'm going to delete these faces, then select these edge loops, do bridge edge loops, and then do E and then Alt S to extrude that out. And then I'm going to do Shift D, and then press E, Alt S again, then delete these faces, and then select these edge loops and press F to fill them in. So now we have the window. I'm going to click on both and then do Control L and then copy modifiers again so it has a bevel. And then I'm going to select these bottom vertices just to make this kind of edge lip on the bottom of this window. And then bring this over just so it's up against the step. And then do duplicate this. Can do Shift Tab to enable snapping to bring that over. And then I'm just going to make this kind of door handle element here. It's just going to be a simple cube. Again, copy modifiers to bring a bevel into this part as well. And then just do Shift D to duplicate that face and then press E to extrude that out again. Then do Control A to apply that scale. Then I'm going to add a cylinder, scale that right down and then rotate that and then go into the top view. And then from this top view, if we select this edge face, we can then do Control Shift Alt S and then we can try Y. If that doesn't work, we try X. And then we can press 1 to rotate that. And then we can select this edge loop here. And then Control B just to add some bevel. And then from here, select the first one, then select the second one and copy modifiers again. I'm just going to add another loop cut here. And then from here, I can do Shade Auto Smooth. I'm going to scale this down a little bit so it's less thick, but then just bring this out like that. And then from there, what we're missing are some hinges. So I'm going to add a cylinder here. I'm going to scale that right down. From there, I can duplicate it down a few times. Just do Shift R to copy that last action. I can then copy modifiers again, but that's too high, so let's just reduce that a little bit. And then do Shade Auto Smooth again. Then in edit mode, press A and then do Shift D to copy everything down. I'm just scale them up quite a lot and then just bring this bit up again. So that should be a nice hinge length. I'm going to select all of these and then do Shift D, X, sorry, Shift D, Y, and then do Object Mirror to mirror that. So now we have two door handles. These are a little bit too high, so let's bring this down. And then I'm going to copy this element and duplicate that up. This can be this top window section. Select this top edge and bring this right down. And then what I can do is go into object mode and duplicate that and snap that as well. Duplicate that and snap that as well. I can then duplicate this window as well, and we're going to completely modify this one so it can kind of go around the step. Let's bring this element all the way over. Then in object mode, I'm going to select both of these and go into local view so it's a little bit easier to focus. Press X to delete these faces, then X to delete these faces as well. Then I'm going to select these edges and do S, Y, 0. And then I'm just going to go into the side view so it's a little bit easier to see what I'm doing. Then I'm going to do Control, Shift, Alt, S, and then X, and then 1, bring that over. And then EZ, then EY, and then EZ, and EY. Then I'm going to extrude that out on the Y-axis, and then I'm going to do, again, Control, Alt, Shift, S, and then X, and then 1. And then what I'm going to do is just scale this up just so it matches this top element. Select these two open faces and do right-click, Bridge Faces. And then do the same thing for these ones as well. And then just select these two open edges here and click these and F to fill those in. I think that wasn't 100% accurate, but never mind. I don't think we're going to see that element anyway. Let's just select all these windows and bring this over to make room for the new piece. And then this part should probably be up a bit to match the other section as well. And then bring this down to also match that section as well. And then duplicate this element so we have this top window again. Let's just edit this so it fits. Then select all of these, and then I'm just going to bring this part down because we don't need this bottom lip like we did on the door frames. Let's duplicate this part over. Then what I'm going to do is instead of creating more myself, I'm going to use a library, and we are iMeshh. We have our own library of assets, so it's far easier now to just use these assets. I'm going to add this door. I'm going to scale this up and then just try to match it roughly into place. I do have some sort of artistic license here where I can scale this ever so slightly, and doors can be quite large in general. Anyway, I'm going to add some loop cuts to make room for the door. And then I'm going to select this face and extrude it. I'm going to extrude this part again. I'm going to make a makeshift room so that there is some actual dark area behind the door. Then I'm going to do Smart UV Unwrap for this whole object. And the same thing for this element here. And then I'm going to make sure I have a bevel on that one as well. It's a little bit too hard, so let's just reduce that. Let's select all of these windows. And let's scale this down so they are roughly door width. I'm going to make sure I go to item and actually scale this right down, because doors are about 1 meter thick or 1 meter wide. So I'm going to get it quite close to that. It doesn't matter if they're a little bit off. And let's duplicate this over. So we have extra windows. Okay, so now we have the windows. I don't think it matters they don't go all the way across. I don't think we see those shadows anyway. Now let's just make sure we fix these hinges as they got lost. Also, these got stretched a little bit, so let's just unstretch these and put these back to where they were. Now I'm going to select all the windows and then do Ctrl J to join them. And then I'm going to make a new material and call that metal black. Then I'm just going to make another material, call that one glass. Then I'm going to select all of the glass elements and assign that to them. So let's select all of these faces and then do Shift G, select similar by area. And then I can assign that to the glass material. Then do A and then Shift N to make sure that all the normals are facing the correct direction. Then for the glass in the viewport, I'm just going to turn this alpha right down so we can actually see through it. Then I'm going to duplicate this floor element to make a rough floor area outside. And then for this glass, I'm just going to completely turn it off for now. I'm just going to make it an alpha. I don't think we'll actually see the glass anyway. So I'm going to try alpha. If it looks good, then I'm going to leave it like that because it should be faster anyway. For the lighting, I'm just going to add a area light for now. Let's scale this right up. So it roughly covers this whole area, and rotate this downwards because the sky comes from upwards. And then scale this down again. And I'm going to set this to 1000 watts. Then I'm going to set this to Eevee. Turn on ray tracing, set this to AGX. Now under ray tracing, these values work for me, but I will turn max roughness to 1. As screen tracing, I will set the precision to 1 as well, thickness to 10 meters. And then for the lighting, make sure that you turn it to jittered lighting, and then also make sure you set it to jittered lighting in the render settings. Then I'm going to add a gobo, which is basically a transparent plane which has a shadow on it. And you should be able to find some of these free online, but you can, of course, get them from iMeshh. So this will be able to quickly add tree shadows into the scene. This is actually animated as well, so you can make an animation from these. I'm going to put them roughly into place, but I can't see the shadows, so let's add a sun lamp. And then I'm just going to rotate this into the scene roughly this direction here. And then under the sun settings, I'm going to change the angle to 1 so it's a bit softer. And then strength to 10 so we can actually see it. And then the color a little bit orange. It would be nice if we can actually use black body inside of Eevee as well. But there we go. So now we can see the shadows. Then I'm going to duplicate this over as well so we can add more trees. And that covers the scene nicely. Now I'm going to duplicate that. And then I'm going to make that white. And I'm going to set the strength to 20. And I'm also going to increase the angle so it's a much softer light, but it is still directional into the scene. I thought this was a nice mix of lighting, which I found. Then I'm just going to turn down the exposure. And then this is the final look. I think this looks quite nice. And then also set them both to jittered. And then under samples, I'm going to set this to 32. You can increase this if you want to, but it will increase the render time. And then I'm going to select this bottom face, do Shift G, select similar by normal, and just make sure you deselect any that you don't want. And then I'm going to separate that. And then this will be the plane which I'm going to add the wood floor to it. You can just add a plain wood floor material to that if you wanted to, something like this. which is also from iMeshh, of course, but we do have a wood floors geometry nose object, which I really like because it has some physical geometry on it, so some real bevel. So I'm going to select the original floor, and then I'm going to select the new wood floor afterwards, do Control J to join them. Then I'm going to go to edit mode, and then select these edges and just delete that imported plane. Now we are left with a complete wood floor that we like. I'm just going to increase the size. I think these planks are a little bit too small, and it's a little bit slow with this size. So let's just do 2.4 meters. And then you can actually type the calculation straight into here. So times that by 2 to get 30 centimeter widths, and then rotate these 90 degrees. Then we have the planks. And we can't see these inside of Eevee because there is a texture limit, and these have a lot of textures. So I'm just going to remove this node here. I'm going to add just a principal shader, and this actually works. So I'm just going to plug the base color into base color, roughness into roughness, and add normal into normal, and then just put the normal map node in the middle. Now that works. Now that looks perfect. Nice and detailed wood floors. Now for the walls, I'm going to add this concrete material from shared textures. 1K or 2K is fine. And then I'm going to make a new material, call that one wall. And then with edit preferences, and then I'm going to add add-on. I'm going to type in node wrangler and just make sure that's enabled. If it's not there, you might be able to find it in get extensions. It should be node wrangler. And then with that enabled, I'm going to select the principal shader and do Control Shift T, and then select all the textures I want, and then it will automatically connect them all. I'm going to set this mapping to 4, so it's a little bit smaller, and delete this because I don't want this. And then also I'm going to remove the displacement because it's a little bit harsh. I'm then going to add a hue saturation and turn it completely to no color because I think it should be closer to white, and also set the value to 2 so it's a bit brighter. And then maybe try a higher value because I think it might be a little bit too small again. So it's just some subtle detail on this wall. That's great. Now this has a little bit funky textures going on, and I do find that it is something to do with that value there, so just delete that. I don't know why it imports with that, but anyway, just remove it. And now I'm also going to bring that door down a little bit as well. And bring this element down as well, just so that it actually touches the top of the door. And then let's bring this door over slightly so it actually goes inset into the wall. It's a bit more realistic. And it's not dark enough inside that wall, so I'm just going to increase this room size. And then let's select this floor, and then we're just going to bring that out as well. I'm just going to turn off bevel on this geometry node system because it's a little bit slow. Let's bring this out as well. Doesn't need to be exact, we're not going to go in that room anyway. Then under the shader editor, under the world tab, this is a huge mess, so let's just delete this world currently. I'm going to click new. Then I'm going to add a new environment texture, and then I'm going to find one which I like. And there is a sunset forest from HDRI Haven, so I'm going to plug that into there. And we'll put the link in the description. I'm going to add a mapping node to that. And then I can rotate that a set amount if I wanted to. And then I'm going to add a light path node. I'm going to add a mix shader, and then duplicate that. Background node. And let's plug that HDRI straight into there as well. So now we can tell it that we want it to be super bright, but we don't actually want it to contribute any lighting to the scene if we want to. So let's plug is camera, plug that into there. So now we can see it's much brighter, and a much more overexposed exterior is a lot more realistic. So I'm just going to decrease this value to 0.5. I don't really want it to contribute any light to the scene. I just want it to be nice in the background. Let's move this over slightly so it covers the steps a little bit more. And now I am looking for a wood texture to go onto this element. And I do know the name of it, so I'm just going to search for it on this list. And these are all the woods of it, also available on iMeshh. So let's just import this wood into here. And then I'm going to Smart UV unwrap all of these. And we can see that it has actually unwrapped. Out of the UV editor, let's just scale this up by 2 times. And that should look good. Now scale it again, actually. I think it should be a bit smaller. Then I'm just going to copy these modifiers as well. So this has bevel as well. Now I'm going to link material for this step, so this is also wood. We can scale that up 2 times and 2 times again, just so the texture is nice and small. Don't scale it up too much until you can start seeing some tiling, but that should work. Now I'm also going to unwrap that top element and give that the same material. Now let's add a plane. Now we're going to add a carpet, so let's extrude that out. I'm going to select these edges, do Control B to bevel that. Then I'm going to select this bottom part and then bevel that part as well. But I don't want any fur to be on the bottom, so let's delete that bottom face. Now I'm going to add some loop cuts so it's nice and square. Then add a modifier and search for displace. Make new, set it to UV, then unwrap this whole plane with just U unwrap. And then I'm going to add a clouds as the texture, go back to the modifier and reduce the strength. I think that the noise is a little bit too big, so let's just increase the size to something like 1. So it's a little bit wavy. Then with proportional editing, I'm going to just bring up these corners because that often happens with carpets. Right, then I'm going to add, let's just maybe reduce these a little bit more. Then I'm going to add a Shift A and then curve and then add a fur object. Then what I'm going to do is go to sculpt mode with these first selected. Then I'm going to click the minus button and then I'm just going to brush over the whole object until they all disappear. Basically going to remove these like little guides that are there, these little white hairs. Then it's completely removed. Then I can add some myself. So I'm going to click this and set this to edge length to be 0.05. And then I'm going to set the count to be 50. Then I'm just going to brush over so there's a nice even amount of them. This makes it easier to basically tell it where I want the fur to be facing. And then I want much more along these edges because I want to fine tune these edges a little bit later. So adding more guides there helps to guide all these individual hairs. And we're only going to see these front and side faces anyway, so let's just put it along these edges. Then with the comb brush, I can then just comb different elements. You can set this to projected if you want to. So then bring all of these up because the bits that go against the floor are probably going to be going upwards, not through the floor. So let's just pull these away from the floor a little bit more. Then from the top view, I can just comb, just randomize this, just bring these all in as if someone's walking over it and there's different elements on it and, you know, just make it random. And then increase the density to 25,000. And then set the minimum factor to 0.75. Now the noise I think is a little bit too harsh, so let's just reduce that and set the scale to be bigger. And then do preserve length. This noise is always a little bit too harsh. Also for frizz, let's just reduce that a little bit. Then I'm going to go to assets and then I'm going to set it to essentials. And then from here we have some hair essentials. Let's drop in clumps and then let's also just reduce the factor. Something like that should look good. Maybe even less. Then under the object shader editor, I'm going to click use nodes. And I think just the base principle shader is fine for now. I'm just going to add kind of like this dirty looking texture, but adding that to fur I actually find looks quite nice. So I'm actually going to plug in generated here. And now we have this kind of dirty looking carpet, which actually kind of fits. You can add some sheen if you want to. You can also add the principled hair, but I do find sometimes that this actually looks perfectly fine. Now these edge elements, what I'm going to do is just brush these up even more. I do want some facing the camera so that it does kind of cover this front area because it was too exposed and we can kind of see the blanket underneath it. So now it's completely covered with just fur, so that's good. Now let's add some seating. We have all these sofas, of course, so let's just choose one that we like. This one is perfect. Scale up ever so slightly. Again, we have some artistic license. It doesn't matter if it's like 10% scaled. Let's mirror this and bring that roughly into place. And also scale this blanket over as well, or this rug. And then I'm going to add a lounge chair. This one works nicely, but I don't want this throw on it, so let's just remove that. Just going to roughly put it into place that I think looks nice. Then under the shader editor, this is kind of like a legacy shader editor to emulate the sheen, but sheen is now existent in the actual principal shader. So we can remove a lot of these nodes. So we could just remove all of these. And then we have this like velvet or fall off shader, which is a custom one made by us. And we plug that straight into sheen and it makes a nice sheen texture. And then we could just plug the color straight in there. So we could just ignore all the old nodes except for the color. And that sheen looks really lovely. Kind of breaks it up a little bit. We can choose like a nice orange color. And then let's just drag this color straight into this sheen tint. Let's make it whiter or lighter and then desaturated. Something like that. So that looks really nice and soft. Under furniture details, let's add some cushions. If you guys want to see any tutorial on how to actually make any of these elements, then please do let me know. I do realize I am now using some assets at this point. So please do write in the comments if you want me to do a follow-up tutorial on how to actually make some of these elements. So with these cushions, I'm just going to slide these ones over. We'll come to these in a minute. I'm just going to roughly put them into place. They do look wonky from the side, but from the front view, you can't actually tell. So let's just roughly put them into place. And let's just put them through here. We can use proportional editing to push it out of the floor if we want to. Then duplicate that over and roughly put that into place. And I also gave them the same material as well. I want it all to be consistent throughout. Let's add this coffee table to the side here. And then let's add another one for the center item. I'm going to pull it slightly out of the fur. We're probably going to have to pull it out slightly even more when we actually turn the fur to full resolution. Then I'm just going to add some decorative sets. These are really nice quick sets to decorate your scene. Of course, if you're making a scene yourself, you should be able to make some of these. They're relatively quite simple. They're usually just vases and cylinders. But again, if you want a tutorial on these bits, I will do an extra tutorial. Just write in the comments, and the ones which get the most votes, I think I'll do those ones for the actual tutorials. Now these wrinkles are a little bit too harsh on these, so I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to go to UV editor and scale these down with 0.5. Now the wrinkles should be a little bit bigger, which is a bit more realistic. Then under decorations, let's go to frames. Let's add in this frame. Just add one of them for now. I'm going to make it quite big. Somewhere on the third line is fine. And then let's add a bunch more decorative sets. Now for these, in Eevee, I do find that it really does struggle when there's lots of textures. It does drastically increase the render time. So what I'm going to do is these items are in the background. So I'm simply going to remove all of the elements which are not the diffuse color, and I'll roughly choose the roughness which it should be. So if it's a glossy material, I'll make it glossy. If it's a concrete, I may make it a little bit rough, but I'm just going to remove all of these textures, and that should drastically help optimize this scene. These elements are going to be in the background anyway, so I'll have depth of field, and you won't be able to see these very well anyway. So with these textures removed, it's still going to look great. So I'm just going to go through all of these, and it should drastically help optimize your scene. This is actually quite useful even in cycles. If you have quite a big scene with items in the background, just remove all of the textures you're not going to see and just keep the base color, and it'll still look good. And then let's do the same thing for these ones as well. And then we can add another decorative set as well. Now for a lounge chair, let's add another one. Something like this is fine. Let's rotate it so it's on a 45-degree angle, so it's not completely straight, because that looks a bit strange. Then for all of these as well, I'm going to remove the subdivision modifier. You're never going to be able to tell from this distance that it's not applied. These objects are working great for close-ups especially, so we can just remove all of these details. Let's add this lamp, roughly put it into place, and this lamp is my favorite. It always looks good. There we go. The scene is looking very, very nice. So let's scale up these decorative sets a little bit. Again, my artistic license, 10-20% scaling will be fine. And then for this lamp, make sure to click this and make maybe power of 10 so we can actually see that light on. Then also make sure that we have depth of field turned on as well. And now we can see the power of the real time, where I'm moving the camera and everything seemed to be completely moving in real time. I'm going to scale this chair slightly and move just a few elements around just so it feels a bit nicer, fills in the scene a little bit nicer. And then for the black frames, I'm just going to find a pre-made metal that I already have, and then I'm just going to assign that to these black frames. That looks great. I'm going to set the f-stop for 5 for the camera. And then let's just move these final elements around. And then I'm also going to turn the environment where it's contributing to the scene to 0, so there's more contrast. So all that we're left is just the overexposed background, which works very nicely here. Then in the compositor, add a glare node. And then in the viewport, make sure you have compositor set to camera. Set this to bloom and set the mix even lower. And then set this to high quality and change the threshold. And then decrease the size. So we have some really nice glare coming in from the outside. And we can't even tell that there's no glass there. If you want to try with glass, then feel free, but I still think this looks great. Now for these cushions, I'm actually going to give them the same green color as what's actually in the background image, just so that it kind of fits a little bit more. Just use the eyedropper and that works perfectly fine. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select the carpet, and I'm going to make the carpet a little bit darker using the hue saturation node. And then I'm also then going to make the wood floor a little bit brighter by increasing the value and decreasing the saturation. So there's nice contrast there. Then just a final tweak of the shadows. And then also I'm going to make these cushions a little bit more red so they do match the hanging lamp a little bit more. That works way nicer. And then just add a curves. I'm just going to bring up the blacks ever so slightly so there's just a nice film look to the blacks. And then also set this just to high contrast. And there we go. So this rendered in 53 seconds, which is quite amazing. You can increase the resolution if you wanted to. That will increase the render time. You can also increase the sample amount and also the raise. This will increase the render time, but you will get more detail. But I did find that this actually worked really, really nicely. I do think we need some more samples right where this rug is, because there's some denoise artifacts there where some rug detail has been lost. But in general, that looks really, really nice. If you're having problem rendering that, you can go to viewport, limit size for textures and set that to 512 if you wanted to, or even higher or lower depending on your GPU. And actually lowering that to 512 actually decreased render time to 46 seconds, which is actually incredible for this kind of scene. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so in general, that was quite fast. I think that the main key part was mainly just the lighting and a few render settings. Now, of course, I did use a lot of pre-made assets in this. If you did want me to create another tutorial on how to create any of these assets, please let me know, write in the comments, and then I'll look through them. And the one with the most likes, I'll actually try to create for you. But I really enjoyed this tutorial and trying out Blender's new real-time engine. Actually incredible to work with. And it's actually given me some hope that I'll actually use it for some projects going forwards. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe. If you want to see another tutorial like this, then please let me know. And thank you very much. I'll see you guys soon.